Good morning today, 30th September 2024. We are going to discuss editorials from several news papers. The Hindu, Business Standard, The Pioneer, Live Mint. Wherever good articles are there, we will pick and we will discuss them. Past few days, see, I have been busy with many other tasks, so couldn't make any videos. All those missed weeks, I'll make one big video or day by day I will release soon. From today onwards, we will start regularly. First article we will talk about what kind of practices and standards that must have been followed in the Indian agroforestry sector. Agriculture and forestry, how you can combine, that is called agroforestry. How you can increase forest cover. Those things have been discussed in detail. If you see in India, India has vast potential in the agroforestry sector. Now, this sector is a unique opportunity, thereby integrating our carbon finance projects with several other measures, afforestation, reforestation, revegetation, basically called ARR initiative. There is even possibility to expand area under agroforestry from 28.4 million hectares to 53 million hectares by 2050. If you see agroforestry, presently 8.65% of India's total land area, so that is under agroforestry. 19.3% of the India's carbon stock that comes under agroforestry only. Therefore, these figures says agroforestry is very important in environment sustainability, even in economic development also. Even recent research suggests if adequate policies, financial support, incentives, if they are implemented, this agroforestry sector, this will contribute to additional carbon sink of over 2.5 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2030. You can understand the quantum. India has ambitious target to become net zero by 2070. So this will be alternate sector where we can put a lot of practice on. So what kind of common practice in carbon standards? If you see in carbon finance, common practice, this is one criteria. What is this common practice? This criteria, this is used to assess whether the project is additional. That means it goes beyond what is done in the given region. Suppose say you have carried out some environmental project in one area, then you are carrying out another project, then this can be termed as common practice. Basically, so you are bringing another project, additional thing. For ARR project, what is ARR? Afforestation, reforestation, revegetation. This involves determining similar activities are commonly practiced without any financial incentives provided by carbon credits. If you see, according to carbon standards, VCS Institute or gold standards, any activity deemed to be common practice, it has to be qualified for carbon credits. So it should contribute to additional environmental benefits beyond certain norms. Carbon credits, what do you mean by first thing carbon credits? Suppose say one company is there, August is one company. What they will do, they will produce or they will manufacture some goods. By manufacturing those goods, they will emit a lot of carbon dioxide. So in order to put cap on how much carbon dioxide need to be emitted from August company, government will put, you can emit certain extent to carbon. If you are emitting beyond that, then you need to purchase carbon credits. Suppose you are purchasing carbon credits or then you need to pay extra amount, then you have to buy those credit in order to make extra manufacturing. Then this will make companies to reduce their manufacturing. Suppose say company following some cost optimization technique and even environment sustainable technique, then they will reduce less carbon dioxide and then they will become more efficient. This is the concept behind carbon credits. But the current definition of common practice in global standards, this reflects realities of large-scale agricultural practices that can be found in Latin America, Africa, United States. These areas, land holdings are very extensive and contiguous also. But In United States, if you go, farmer holds almost 250 acres. In India, if you go, we don't have 250 acres. India is a fragmented landholding society. There will be small and marginal landholding, small and marginal farmers will be there. So, Indian case, agroforestry, this will become a tough task. If you see recent data, 86.1% of the Indian farmers, they are small and marginal because their landholding capacity will be less than 2 hectares. These farmers, they engage in agroforestry they, in a non-systematic, scattered manner, planting trees alongside crops or like small patches of the fallow land. Fallow land means the barren land kind of, or the land that has been left uncultivated for several years. While this thing is beneficial because of the unsystemic or non-systematic measure, these kind of practices may not meet additional criteria set by current carbon standards because they are just common within the Indian context. So this presents significant challenge. So this exclude large number of Indian farmers from participating in this ARR carbon finance projects. So thereby it denies opportunity to earn additional income from the carbon credits. So what kind of need shall be followed by India-centric approaches? Given India's unique agricultural landscape, there is urgent need to redefine and consider common practice criteria to better reflect specific challenges and opportunities within Indian agroforestry sector. If we see in India-centric approach, this recognizes small incremental changes in land management practices, that is basically adapting more systematic agroforestry techniques or utilizing carbon finance to maintain tree cover. These things can become very transformative. So these must be the India-centric approach. Even revising and consideration of the common practice standards so that they accommodate fragmented, small and marginal farmers in India. This will unlock vast potential of carbon sequestration. So we will bring all the farmers under this pool and then we can reduce carbon footprint. This even enables greater number of farmers to participate in the carbon finance projects. So it provides them additional income streams. It also puts India ahead of the climate goals. Further, also by acknowledging this fragmented nature of Indian agriculture, carbon credit platform, this could be redesigned so that incentives can be gone to this systematic agroforestry. It enhances both environmental sustainability and rural livelihood also. If you see agroforestry, this offers a viable solution to various challenges faced by India's agricultural sector. By promoting these alternative livelihoods, even providing additional income streams for farmers, these projects they help address issues such as low productivity, dependence on monsoon, environmental degradation also. The carbon finance provided by ARR projects, these finance enables more systematic and sustained approach to agroforestry because this would be very difficult to achieve given the several financial pressures, market constraints that have been faced by Indian farmers. For farmers, those who are facing a lot of issues, even unpredictable weather patterns, fluctuating crop yields, participating in these ARR finance projects, this will present a pathway to income diversification. By integrating trees into agricultural landscape or even restoring degraded forest area on their land, farmers can tap into additional revenue streams through carbon sequestration. Beyond economic gains, ARR projects they deliver crucial environmental benefits. What are all those? Enhancing soil fertility, improving water retention, mitigating soil erosion, even bolsters agriculture productivity and ensures long-term sustainability also. How to help small and marginal farmers? There are several research institutes are there. One among them, TERI, the Energy Resource Institute, they already demonstrated potential of ARR projects in India because 19 projects across states, they benefited 56,600 farmers. But in order to such initiative to grow in large scale manner, it is very important. International carbon finance platforms, they need to revise their standards so that it can be better aligned with the realities of Indian agriculture. As India looks to expand agroforestry sector, even India looks to leverage benefits of the carbon finance. It is very crucial. International standard evolved to reflect specific condition of the Indian subcontinent. Revising this common practice guideline to be more inclusive in Indian agroforestry practices, this will enable millions of small and marginal farmers in order to participate in ARR projects. This would not only drive sustainable development, this also provides much needed boost to incomes of the millions of rural households. This contributes to overall economic and environmental resilience of the country. So therefore, it is very important. Carbon credit platforms such as Vera, Gold Standard, they recognize the need for India-centric standards. Only recognizing these things, we can fully utilize the potential of agroforestry, ARR initiatives, and those things can be realized in Indian case also. These things will pay a good way for greener, more sustainable, economically prosperous future for Indian farmers. So this is the article about India's outlook, what kind of common practice standards that have to be followed. We'll discuss next article. This article is about global inequality, how to bring the equality principle. This article has been discussed in detail from inequality point of view. If you see summits of the future, this raised several fundamental questions on global governance. Shall we focus on the greater power of competition, or do we need to focus on continuing imbalance in the institutions, agenda settings, global inequality? First question basically, whether we need to focus on greater competition. This is kind of a means. That means by focusing on the competition, you will achieve something, but not in the ends with continuing debating on the justice. So if you put more focus on the competition, those who are having money, they will start their industry. Then those who are not having money, they start working. Then richer becomes richer, poorer becomes poorer. So that gap widens. This is basically called inequality. If you see global goals, they do not resolve challenges. They support new forms of cooperation. The summit, recently Summit for Future, this resulted in a global digital impact initiative, declaration on future generations. This is basically inspirational call for national actions. The concrete impact is international scientific panel, global dialogue on artificial intelligence, even implementation map and intergovernmental consultation mirror how climate change came into global agenda 30 years ago. Climate change, has been put aside by scaling up adaptation of the finance. GDP also includes sustainability. Developed countries, they continue to have the capacity to shape global agenda. Basically, this summit, they didn't give clear pathway for Security Council reform. Even this summit has called for categories of members. Reforms for governance of global financial institutions, this is also limited to pledge to give developing countries a greater say in decision making. They review the sovereign debt that has been reiterated. Concerns of developing countries, they have been taken aside, not even heed of. The problem here is there are several definitions. One definition is G7 member, this can be described as a club of victor of Second World War or in a group of colonial powers. G7, if you see, several countries are there: United States of America, UK, France. So these all are colonial powers. So still they have the same kind of mindset, colonial mindset. Colonial times, India used to be colony, and then British used to rule us. Now, author says they are under the same mind. United States established G7 in 1973, basically to provide global agenda in the United Nations, because this was an anti-developing country body. There was a clash between Western capitalism, Soviet communism. This provided these colonies, they became world's poor, more space and voice. G7, they formed, initially there was a huge competition between capitalism and communism. You might have heard about Karl Marx principle of communist policies that have been in vogue in Russia for several years. And then Russian communism was spreading across entire globe like anything. Then United States of America came, they slowly brought democracy, and then things initially took out from there. And then there was Cold War between two countries for almost one and a half decade. If you see world political geography, this was reshaped with all these things. The poor remained trapped at the bottom of the economic and geopolitical hierarchy. This kind of imbalance can be reflected at United Nations also. If you see United Nations, recent figures from United Nations shows 17% of the sustainable development goals, they are on the track. Developing countries, they hold 29 trillions in public debt, 847 billion in interest payment, even a negative net resource transfer in 2022 also. There was a first joint declaration by G20 finance leaders in July. It was on international tax cooperation. This ended with disagreement whether United Nations or Organization for Economic Cooperation Development, whether they are the right forum to advance this kind of agenda, basically related to tax cooperation. Real change began with re-emergence of China and India with BRICS grouping. BRICS was formed in 2009, but it still awaits reverse of colonial imbalances in the key areas. 1950, if you see, United States of America, they use 40% of the world's natural resources in order to put a dominant power, even in order to set up multilateralism in unilateral manner. With the reconstruction of Europe by 1970, their share had come down to 26%. Multilateralism, this evolved into treaties. This have authority to impact national policies also. G7, if you see, their share decreased 1/5 of the 2010 when Asia continent has half of the global resources to use. If you see in today's more equal world, interest of global south, they gained more voice, but they are not able to set the agenda. South Africa in 2023, they had to file a case to determine obligations under the climate regime. This is even severe indictment of conference diplomacy. Basically what happened during colonial times, during 1750s to 1860, industrial revolution started. Countries such as United States of America, UK, France, and most of the European countries, industrial revolution came. They benefited like anything. During that time, we were their colonies. We used to be a major hub for importing and exporting the goods that have been produced in India to other countries at cheap cost. So this was like how countries have been relegated for several times, and then they became developed countries. Today we are still on the developing path, but these developed countries, they should help developing countries in order to grow further, in order to establish equity on the world map. But these developed countries, they completely forgot how they colonized the country, how they manipulated the people, how they have made slaves in African countries, even Indian also. You might have heard several times about bonded labor. So these things, they forgot everything. Today, if you see global climate agreement and all, we need to adopt sophisticated technology, but we don't have that kind of money in order to adopt such a kind of technology, wherein these countries, because of the industrial revolution, because of the early start of their development path, they are on the verge of development, so they can do whatever they want. How to put a foundations of power? See, basically foundations of power, this basically remains in the Western countries for almost few decades. But global trend, this is favor in the global south. In 1800, Asia consumed more energy than rest of the world. In 1850, Asia consumed much energy as the West. In 1950, if you see, West consumption was 3 times the rest of the world. In 2000, West consumed much energy as the rest of the world. So this kind of imbalance, the sphere of technology and how the countries have been originating in their own areas. This is what we discussed recently in history whatever I have discussed. Even if you see capacity, this is more severe with China and India because they are becoming global leaders only in certain areas only. If this trend towards more equal world, this should be in all dimension. If you see in 2000, there were 4.6 billion people lived in countries whose combined GDP was just 20% of the 755 million people who lived in the G7 countries. By 2016, GDP share of 17 developing countries as a percentage of G7 countries is tripled to 63%. So the summit, the future summit, this accepts the imbalance, but it focuses on how progress is measured rather than measures to bridge the gap. Even the summit recognized GDP focuses on economic performance of the society, but they want to link it to the sustainability. Broader understanding of the prosperity considers non-monetary factors. Several things are there: infrastructure, municipal services, affordable energy, educational opportunity, healthcare, access to drinking water, even urban living standards of the country. So comparable levels of focus is overdue. We always focus on GDP terms. If you see human development indicator, there are several things we are lacking. What is the big lesson from the summit? Developing countries, they have yet to exploit opportunities presented by United Nations system. There are international political processes open because of the procedural terms. It has been informed. Even consensual sciences developed by official experts. This will become a case for global governance of artificial intelligence, even modification of GDP also. Experts, they framed issues in a manner that determines problem and how it needs to be resolved. As a global power, this is shifting back to Asia. The both giants are conscious that their ideas different from the dominant views espoused by the West on how societies to work, how they need to change and how they can influence. Basically, Asia is growing like anything. India and China, they are developing countries. Their economy is rising at the fast. In order to give acceptance to geopolitics, Asia needs to be involved more deeply from very beginning in the expert bodies on artificial intelligence, even GDP, in order to shape our global governance by global priorities, cooperation and justice. But truly speaking, China and India, there is a lot of differences are there. China always follows dominant views. They want to become superpower at the cost of other countries. That cooperation is basically lacking. Those countries that are surrounded by China, they are just not as happy as being neighbor to China because China's policies are like that. In South China Sea, if you see, they just occupied entire area. Even they are claiming territorial waters of the other countries also. For example, Vietnam, Philippines, you might have heard several times. Even Malacca Strait also, they are blocking the routes. So in Asia, we have huge potential to grow, but this will happen only when we cooperate together. So this is about global inequality, how to bring a bridge to this inequality. Next article we will discuss about India's manufacturing hub capacity. Can India become a manufacturing hub? As we all are aware, India wants to become world developed nation by 2047 with 30 and wants to become a $30 trillion economy. So how manufacturing sector can play a huge role in India? If you see a study report by IDBI Capital, India is set to add 1 trillion to its GDP every 18 months over the next 6 years. If you say with this kind of momentum, country is on track to become US $10 trillion economy and it positions itself as the world third largest economy by 2030. India presently has GDP of $4 trillion economy. Even this IDBI Capital report, they highlighted India's accelerated growth. This is driven primarily by manufacturing sector. So this sector projected to contribute 32% of the gross value added. Even this sector adds, India will overtake top 5 economies in the manufacturing index of industrial production, basically United States, China, Germany, South Korea and Japan. Manufacturing, this involves production of the wide spectrum of consumer products, industrial machinery. There are several other things also. It is very most important component in the industrial activity at broader level. This includes construction, logistics, aerospace, maintenance, services that are required to industrial activities. Even if you see contribution of industrial sector to India's GDP, this is around 30%, in which manufacturing this supports 17%. If you see share of agriculture and allied sectors in GDP, this is just 18%. Remaining 52% comes from the service sector. Service sector, they basically encompasses intangible services. What do you mean by intangible services? Those services you cannot see. Education, for example, you teach to someone, you cannot see how much you have taught, but you can see how much they have learned and how the value system has been shaped. Those kind of things are called intangible services. Basically education, health, entertainment, hospitality, tourism, banking, insurance, all these things are called intangible services. While all these sector, agriculture, manufacturing and service sector, they play a crucial growth. They create jobs, they increases income. Manufacturing sector, they can provide more sustainable basis for providing jobs and surety of income. There is a sharp contrast between agriculture. Basically agriculture is a seasonal activity. Economic fortunes, they are mostly tied up with monsoon area. When monsoon is good, their agricultural returns are good, otherwise not. Manufacturing, this is a good buffer to absorb excess workforce from agriculture because there will be positive spin-offs, even higher productivity and income also. Even in manufacturing sector also, MSMEs, they occupy very important position. If you see MSMEs, they are ancillary units engaged in production, manufacturing, processing of goods and commodities. They have supplied large enterprises and master units also. These MSME units, they operate on small scale. They are further categorized into micro, small, medium enterprises. They depending upon the investment turnover threshold also. According to Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, if we see share of MSME manufacturing output in all India manufacturing output, this is almost around 36%. You can understand, if suppose 100 manufacturing companies are there, so 36 manufacturing company output is coming from MSME itself. Share of export of MSME specified products in all India export, this has been around 44 to 50% in last couple of years. If you see in employment also, employment, this was released by McKinsey Global Institute. Even employment area, India contributes 62% as a total. But in the past, manufacturing hasn't been given a required push. It contribution of 17% of the GDP, even lower share of total employment about 10%. So these are all things shows manufacturing has been largely neglected activity. India aiming to generation of 32% of the incremental GVA from manufacturing. This shows determination to put efforts in next 6 years and so. So in order to double our efforts in the manufacturing sector. So with this pace, by 2030, the share of manufacturing in GDP, this will be reached by 26%. Whether we can follow this kind of share, whether we can reach 26% from present 17%. There are several factors are there. First thing is robust domestic demand, strong export potential, heavy lifting by the central government because of their schemes, even state government also to build a lot of infrastructure. There are even focus on increasing investment by private sector. There are several key initiatives are there. Make in India, this is very important role in strengthening countries' manufacturing capabilities that has been even strengthened by production linked incentive schemes. India is also taking lead role in recalibrated global supply chains in order to position country in greater arena. As a global manufacturing hub, this will also give a greater boost to micro, small, medium enterprises and many sectors so on. Nearly 70% of India's GDP, this has been driven by domestic consumption itself. Stimulating demand, this will be a key to putting manufacturing in the accelerated, sustained growth trajectory. For this thing to happen, not only people's income should grow, but it should also evenly, widely distributed. Otherwise, in last article we discussed, it will lead to income inequality. What kind of facts we speak? According to Oxfam, inequality kills. With their report, Inequality Kills, the collective wealth of India's 100 richest people in 2020 to 2021, this is a record high of $775 billion. That is almost over 25% of India's GDP. 100 people contributing 25% of GDP. You can understand how much inequality there in India. Remember this report, Oxfam, and they report Inequality Kills. Every year, Oxfam releases inequality report. Basically, this kind of shows extreme inequality in distribution of the income and wealth. There are several other pointers to confirm this is true. Even analysis from financial position of the India's largest companies, if you see BSE index and all. So this shows there is a large variation in the income inequality. Payment factors such as production, they are very, very important. They must be kept under tight conditions even in order to earn profit also. There are several other things we need to focus on. So even companies need to focus on. Firms in the chemical and petrochemical, pharmaceutical, agrochemical sectors, they have more courtesy, high tariffs on imports, licensing and registration requirements. Impact on high taxation, particularly when it comes to petroleum products. If you see petroleum product, crude oil, petrol, diesel, alcohol, liquor, they have been out of GST for several years. There have been demand in order to put up petrol in GST. So basically, how much price will be the petrol if tax has not been levied? Mostly 40 to 50 rupees only. Rest of the amount, whatever you are paying, it is basically tax to government. Whether tax has been correctly utilized by the central government or state government, we need to ask, right? Even increasing the cost of movement of goods, this raises cost of almost every manufactured item. Even exorbitant power tariff, how this can be set to double digits in many states. Power distribution companies, discoms, they have been forced to charge high rates on supplies to industries because they have to make up their under recoveries incurred on the supply to farmers, households, either at free or even subsidized price also. Basically, industries have to bear the brunt. Finally, industries, they are operating at highly interesting environments. Reserve Bank of India, they kept policy rate unchanged at 6.5% along with withdrawal accommodation stance for nearly 20 months. Basically, tight liquidity. This kind of things will lead loans to all industries across the board. MSME, they are more vulnerable to all above cost push factors. Even the issue has not been come to end here. There have been delayed payment for their dues from the large firms. There are, even if these kind of faults have been addressed, initiatives such as Make in India, they won't yield a desired result. India to become manufacturing hub in the world, this is a very distant dream. So in order to resolve all these things, we need to understand from Indian point of view. MSME sector, they are very pivotal. Manufacturing sector, we need to give a big push. But Reserve Bank of India and many collateral issuing organizations, finance, and how capital financing happening, all these things need to be discussed in detail in order to assess whether India can become a manufacturing hub in the coming arena. We discussed 3 articles today. Thank you very much for discussion.